they fucked up. Welcome back to another video. Today we're taking a look at Gangsta, the most hyped anime of summer 2015. And yes, I'm still in denial over the existence of Dragon Ball Super. So was this anime worth all of the hype that it got? No, nothing ever is, honestly. But what's important is, did it actually have a good story? Well, let's find out. Gangsta is set within Ergastulum, a fantasy European city overrun with criminals. Our story follows Nick and Warwick, who together run a group called the Handymen, who are essentially mercenaries who basically do whatever they're paid to do regardless of how dangerous it is. This is the part of the review where I would normally discuss the individual protagonists in detail, but Gangsta really doesn't give you any detail to go by until at least about the halfway point. Even though this is a character-driven narrative, that is something that is pretty important, I would say, but they mostly focus on the concept of these tags. So let's just go there first and get it over with. These tags are essentially a generation of superhuman offspring created by these experimental drug-enhanced super soldiers. These tags were essentially slaves for the majority of their life until the implication of the 3 laws, which are practically the 3 laws of robotics, which sounds like it may not fit in here, but when you consider that one of these laws is that they have to obey all of the orders of humans and that these tags really don't have that much of a personality of their own, yeah, they may as well be robots. Anyways, now that these tags have worked their way up to being second-class citizens, they can enjoy all of the luxuries of being the taint of society. And naturally, you would think for someone to be discriminated against, there would have to be a way that they would stand out from others so that they could actually be discriminated. But there's not. The only difference between them and the normal people is that they wear these dog tags when they could just as easily hide them. And furthermore, the tags themselves can actually increase their rank by killing other tags and bringing in their dog tags. So, yeah, it's more incentive for them to just, take it off and stick in their pocket. Gangsta repeatedly infodumps much of this information in an attempt to glorify their disposition in addition to stressing the problems present within everybody else. Now, while it is important for a character to have flaws, it should never be at the expense of their personality as a whole. It's also important for a character to have goals, and these have none. These 2 handyman mercenaries indiscriminately take work, and we learn little about their personality and history until about the halfway point, but by then, it is already a bit too late when considering the vast amount of irrelevant information presented up until then. When the story finally gets around to passing out characterization, this just comes in the form of a slew of problems and a backstory, which I guess is better than nothing, but it's just not enough. Nick is a deaf, one-eyed former slave drug-abusing fugitive Twilight, and Warwick is a one-eyed victim of child abuse and high-end male prostitute. And he also has no idea of how to cook an egg either. No, seriously, what the fuck is he doing here? It doesn't look like he's about to transfer these eggs into a plate. He's just standing there, overcooking unseasoned eggs in a hot pan with no oil. These handymen are joined by a mentally distressed hooker with a massive set of tits only because an anime like this needs to fulfill the fantasies of its sexually deprived and frustrated audience. And don't get me wrong, I'm not actually trying to insult anyone. I'm just one of the few people who realizes the toxic nature of the Japanese anime industry, which Gangsta actually contributes to. Gangsta presents a plethora of themes, but has no idea of what to do with any of them. Drug abuse, child abuse, corruption, slavery. They were so caught up in creating this abysmal environment for us to have this pity party for its characters that they forget the importance of cause and effect. Hell, for half the anime, our protagonist Nick was overdosed on stimulants. There was one time where he was in a room with those closest to him and he just chugs a bottle of uppers, or like half a bottle of it. Nobody says anything, they just ignore it, even though he just took enough drugs to kill him. Even an hour after chowing down on that big bottle of uppers, he is hit with several above legal dosages of downers, kind of like mixing them together there, and all that it does to him is just make him lethargic. This stuff should kill him. but it doesn't. You know, I'll watch my 70s and 80s anime, and yeah, their ideas of space were laughable. They had no idea of what was going on in space, but as a country, they really didn't know a whole lot either. There was no internet, there really was no way for them to pursue that knowledge. But nowadays, it's just sad, honestly, because I can sit here and Google some of the side effects and overdose symptoms of uppers and downers of various different drugs and see that none of that is present here. And you would figure that anyone who would write a story where drugs are such a large part of it, they would probably do some research. That's like step one of doing a story. If it's about something you don't understand, do research. When you have superhuman characters, you can basically just make up whatever you want them to do and have them do it. You don't need the assistance of drugs for this sort of thing. And that's basically what you're doing anyways by just allowing them to take all these drugs and not having any side effects. So instead of actually elaborating on any of these aforementioned themes, the story throws these mercenaries, these handymen, into this conflict between several other essentially mafia families who are mostly composed of many of these other tags. One of these families is new to the scene and actually upsets the balance of power within Ergastulum and also hunts some of the other tags as well. Nick actually seems like he's the powerhouse of the show, like he's that guy that needs to be there to get stuff done. But it's not really the case because although he is actually the strongest rank of all of these other tags, it's only that way because of the drugs, and there are other characters out there that are naturally stronger than he is. So when you consider that there are no side effects for any of these drugs, even though there should be, and they say that there are, but we just never see any of it, other characters could actually take that same amount and be much stronger than Nick is, meaning that he doesn't really need to be there. You see, this is all so convoluted, and it is honestly tiring to sit here and talk about this, but yet the icing on the cake is just that there are some humans which are lucky enough to be born with this special DNA that makes them innately stronger than even the most doped up tag out there. And it just boils down to one-dimensional characters having tragic problems that don't care about solving any of them just so that they can watch other characters fight each other who are strong just because they're strong. I have no doubt in my mind that the popularity of Gangsta is solely attributed to the fact that there are adult characters in a Western setting, because these are two things that are sorely lacking in most anime out there, but of course there's also the norms that just automatically work with most people, such as the sex appeal, the amount of violence, and just tragic things happening, even though there is really nothing to back it up there. You see, it's also shallow, and the ending itself really doesn't change anything for me. I really didn't expect anything better than the ending when considering what we have here. I'm not going to go into detail about the ending because I never really like to completely give away a conclusion to a story, but essentially there's this big fight, the final, or what's essentially should be the final fight of the story, everything that we've worked up to until now, and it ends halfway through with no conclusion to it. It tries to give you this cliffhanger ending, but it's not quite a cliffhanger. It more so feels like this was supposed to be a 24 episode long anime, but you just stop watching it at 12 episodes in just because that's really all that there is to this, which I am honestly thankful for because I'd rather watch something else, but it is honestly a terrible ending. It's one of the worst endings that I've seen in anime. It's not a cliffhanger. I wouldn't consider this a fuck you, go read the manga ending, as many anime have, because this really did nothing to entice me to read the manga, and I actually did read the manga, by the way, because I know some people will say that the anime was shit, but the manga actually is better. And from what I've read, which is the majority of the parts present within the anime, and I also skimmed through some of the bits after that as well, it's very similar. It's pretty much an accurate translation of the story. The only differences are that the manga contains a bit more dialogue, but the additional dialogue present really didn't add anything that the anime was missing, because the majority of it was actually represented there. Now granted, I didn't go through page by page and panel by panel and compare this to the anime. I really don't care that much. And yeah, it's probably true that the manga is a marginally superior experience. It's not enough to redeem the story. For any improvements to be made, they would just have to start over with a clean slate, honestly. Even after researching the original creator of the Gangsta manga, it turns out that this was actually the longest story that she had ever written. All of her other previous works that I could find were just 6 to 10 page long web comics, which I actually skimmed through as many of them as I could find because it doesn't take long to do that. Not many of them are actually translated, but there really appears to be nothing of any depth there, and I actually found some similarities between many of her characters and having some form of handicap. So it's safe to say she takes the easy road when creating many of these characters by targeting a sympathetic audience. Now, as far as Studio Mad Globe goes, yes, they did fuck up by creating this anime, but it's not like they botched the story by any means. The story was bad to begin with. They just picked a lemon, which just so happened to be the straw that broke the camel's back. Moving on to the presentation, I appreciated the fact that we had a Western setting. The backgrounds were fairly well detailed, despite the fact that the city looked like you really couldn't tell any different areas from each other. It just looks all the same and so bland. I'm not sure if that was their intention or not, if it's just this rundown city where everything looks the same, but that's what they achieved. The characters also look pretty good if they stand still and don't actually move, because this is where my problem comes in with the presentation, is that the animation is actually pretty bad. During some of the fights, it seems as if they forget about basic human anatomy as people flop around like they have noodle arms, and it just takes you out of the moment there. Moving on to the audio, I felt that they did a pretty good job of selecting the majority of the soundtrack. I enjoyed the opening, and it also had some dubstep at times, which was honestly kind of weird having that thrown in there. But as for the voice acting, I watched one episode with the Japanese audio, and then I switched to the English dub for the remainder of the series. That's not because the Japanese audio was bad by any means. It was actually pretty good for what it was, and actually the English dub was pretty bad, but that was really the only way that I could tolerate watching Gangsta. I don't recommend watching this with the English dub, but I don't recommend watching Gangsta anyways. Gangsta gets a 3.8 out of 10. If you've seen Gangsta, then let me know your thoughts about it in the comments section below. Thanks for watching, and be sure to tune in next time when I review Nitabo.